station heading to the radio station. Just got a big thing of water, and I am feeling much better than I did yesterday. Okay, so I want to talk about what's going on at the Daily Wire, because there's been some updates that, of course, everyone's going to be talking about. People already are on X, and I saw the Quartering was talking about it yesterday. But I watched the Quartering, Jeremy on the Quartering, who twitches more than a freaking tweaker. He's very hard to watch because he can't look at the camera and he's always twitching around. It's very strange. But he talked about it, but he didn't. He just got on the surface. He didn't get into what's really going on at the Daily Wire. And I want to talk a little bit about that. The failure of the Daily Wire, and Megyn Kelly is starting a new venture. And I want to talk about that and the risks that she's running. So the update, last week, Jeremy Boring, the co-CEO of the Daily Wire, got fired. And then it came out yesterday that another chief executive at the Daily Wire is out too. So why is the Daily Wire failing? And Jeremy on the Quartering was showing that the views of Ben Shapiro are down dramatically. There's a few reasons why the Daily Wire has failed, and it's the same reason that Glenn Beck ran into big problems a few years ago at the Blaze. And it's like they're carbon copies of one another. Now Glenn Beck's a little different, but there's some similarities. But I want to talk about the Daily Wire, not Glenn Beck, because who cares about Glenn Beck these days? And then I'll get into Megyn Kelly. The Daily Wire's, now this is just my personal opinion, the Daily Wire personalities are not likable people. The premier star of the Daily Wire has always been Ben Shapiro. And while I agree with Ben Shapiro's positions on Israel, because I'm a strong supporter of Israel, he is an unlikable personality. And his popularity has never been real. It's never been organic. It's been popularity that's been pushed through paid promotion. And it's okay to do paid promotion. I don't. I just have you good people who watch me on all my platforms, sharing my videos and my podcast and radio show and everything with people. But Ben Shapiro, it's a lot of paid advertising, millions of dollars in paid advertising that have inflated him to where he is when he is not a likable personality. I don't like Michael Knowles. The other guys that are there are out on the edges and not, the big stars those two are. But what happened at the Daily Wire is two things. On top of their premier host not being likable. I shouldn't say several. Let me just say several things, because as I go on, there'll be more if I get into detail. One, they're never Trumpers. Okay, make no mistake about it, they're never Trumpers. Ben Shapiro, during Trump's first campaign, wrote a column that was published nationally, and the headline of it was "Why I Will Never Vote for Donald Trump." That was Ben Shapiro. So being unlikable and being never Trumpers is never good, because this is Trump's America, and being part of the never Trumper elitist establishment is not what consumers want. I mean, you might as well be MSNBC, right? So that's a big problem with their entire format over there. But another problem that people run into, and this is what Glenn Beck ran into, when people have success, although Glenn Beck's success was organic because he became a superstar on his own through his personality and good work. The Daily Wire was all artificial. Massive, massive social media ads, just millions of dollars. So they were never really popular on their own. It was pushed through, paid views and stuff on all the platforms. But when a lot of these people become big, they start doing too much and expanding, and they get too much of an overhead. It's like a lot of times, you hear there was a show they used to run on CNBC, how lottery destroyed my life, and it was about how lottery winners went bankrupt. These people, these companies like the Daily Wire, they get so big, and then all of a sudden they decide, oh, we're movie producers, we're going to make movies. Oh, we're going to produce television-like programming online. Oh, we're going to hire big personalities like Candace Owens and pay them big salaries. Oh, yeah, we're going to get into the razor business and the candy business and this business and that business. And they expand too much through their arrogance, and eventually it catches up to them. That's another problem they have at the Daily Wire. Not having likable personalities, not having true organic growth, big problems. Too much of an expansion through the egos of Jeremy Boring and others. These are big problems. And they had some devastating moves over the last year, two in particular. I've been told I am dehydrated. That's part of the problem I had yesterday on the air, and I've got to get hydrated. So I'm drinking. I got this big bottle of Fiji I got to drink. I'm drinking too much coffee. So those are a couple of their problems. But dropping Candace Owens was a big blow. And now I'm wondering why they really dropped Candace Owens. Because when it first happened, the common thought and discussion was, well, her positions on Israel are why they pushed her out. And that's what the Daily Wire was positioning it as, although they never were too clear on it. But that's, I think, what most people assumed was Candace Owens' positions on Israel are what caused her departure from the Daily Wire. And now I'm thinking that's not the case. I'm thinking they probably were doing financial cutbacks then. When the Daily Wire hired Candace Owens, she was one of the most famous women in America at the time. She was huge. She was doing her national tour. Her podcast was huge. And when they hired her, I remember the promo video they put out. She had a whole glam squad. It looked like, like Oprah Winfrey. And they spent a lot of money to pay her and on her show. How much? We don't know. But it was a lot of money. For them to have hired Candace Owens, who was the most, I would say, one of the 3 or 4 most famous women in America at the time, to hire her had to cost them millions and millions of dollars. Not just in salary, but in the expenses around her program. So I'm starting to think now that they dropped Candace Owens, not out of her positions on Israel, but they were cutting costs. And I knew that the Daily Wire was in trouble, not because I have any insiders there that were telling me. I don't. I saw them do 2 things that looked very desperate to me. So Candace Owens, that was a big loss to them, by the way. But I saw them do 2 things in the last couple of months that showed me that there was some desperation going on. One, they did a huge panel with Jeremy Boring, Ben Shapiro, and their other 3 personalities at CPAC. It was on stage. They were sitting around having a discussion that was so narcissistic and uninteresting, but it looked to me like something they paid CPAC to do, probably a lot of money. And then when the president gave his State of the Union a couple weeks ago, I saw Ben Shapiro and Jeremy Boring in the gallery. And my first thought, I talked about it on the air, I'm sure, at the time, because I was talking to my wife about it. I said, oh, it looks like they paid some congressman to get this expensive seat there. And they did that to look like they're insiders when they're not. like they're connected and we're invited when they're not. So I thought both of those were desperate acts, but Candace Owens was a big blow to them, losing Candace Owens, which I'm really starting to think was a financial decision now. And then with Brett Cooper, now this is an interesting thing with Brett Cooper, because I don't think anyone realized the popularity of Brett Cooper. I had no idea how popular she was. And when she left the Daily Wire, it was a tremendous blow to the Daily Wire beyond what I think they had any idea of. And then they tried to replace her with producer Reagan in a very FU kind of way to her that really turned people off. And losing Brett Cooper and Candace Owens was a tremendous blow to them so far as their viewers on all their channels, not just on YouTube, but their podcast. And my guess is they lost a lot of subscriptions. I believe, I heard Jeremy on the Quartering say a Daily Wire subscription is $15 a month. Who would pay for that? But I'm sure they lost a ton of subscriptions with the loss of Brett Cooper and Candace Owens. Huge financial losses with those. And these are just major financial losses. And that's why they're collapsing. Bad business decisions, overexpansion, ego, narcissistic arrogance. I mean, they're going to make their own movie version of Snow White. Come on, they're not a movie studio. And unlikable personalities that have artificially inflated popularity. And and for Jeremy Boring to be gone, and now another one of their executives, it was reported on the Quartering, being gone. It's a sinking ship, and what some people are saying that claim to have sources inside the Daily Wire are saying on X. I just drove by a police car with a radar gun. I'm doing okay though, don't worry. Is that someone's going to buy the Daily Wire, and that is very possible. Steven Crowder made a wise decision not going there, right? But yeah, I could most definitely see someone coming in and buying the Daily Wire. Now, that doesn't mean that Ben Shapiro is going to disappear. Whatever happens, Ben Shapiro is a well-known, famous person, and he'll always be around. And so are the other people that are on the Daily Wire. But this is one of the reasons that I don't pursue getting connected with one of these outfits. You know, I had worked for people my entire career, and I started doing my own thing, which was the Brian Craig Show podcast that I co-host with my wife, and my YouTube channel, and other things, because I did not want to depend. I was tired of depending on the whims of others so far as what my future would be. And I said to myself, I'm going to branch out on my own and get my own thing going. And over 10 years ago, I started my podcast. And that's why I did that. And, you know, if one of these outfits wanted me to go work for them, I would have to... I just couldn't go work for somebody. I would have to have some independence, because when you go and work for these companies, see, you know, the alt media is in a transition now where it's becoming the mainstream media. Does that make sense? So Megyn Kelly is starting her own podcast network, and the people she's having on are people I like. She's got 3 people. She's putting together this podcast network, and I like all 3 of them. And she's putting together her own thing. And what Megyn Kelly is doing is starting her own media company and network. And that's great, and I like Megyn Kelly. I imagine Patrick Bet-David would try to... I would not be surprised if Patrick Bet-David tries to buy the Daily Wire. And I think it's interesting, a couple days ago, Ben Shapiro was a guest on Megyn Kelly's program. So I'm wondering if Ben Shapiro is looking to partner somehow with Megyn Kelly. And I've also been thinking that maybe Brett Cooper saw the writing on the wall at the Daily Wire, and that's why she left. The real reason she left is she knew it was going to collapse, because it's collapsing. But I wouldn't be surprised if Patrick Bet David at least tries to buy or puts a bid in on the Daily Wire, because it is definitely in financial collapse, and a lot of people are talking about it being purchased. But Megyn Kelly starting this podcasting network, see, there's some problems with this, because someone asked me a couple days ago about taking my program. Oh, there's something in the road here. I don't want to say who, but somebody had asked me about taking my program to one of these online platforms, and I said I'd really, I would not want to give up ownership of my program. I remember when Steven Crowder released that contract that Jeremy Boring from the Daily Wire sent in when they were trying to get Crowder over there. And you look at what happens when you make a deal with these outlets, and that Steven Crowder proposal from the Daily Wire spelled it all out. They wanted him to give over ownership, at least while he was under contract, to them, to his podcast, to his socials, all his socials, his YouTube channel, and everything else. And you spend years building up your platforms and your following and your audience. And then you get hired by one of these guys and you hand it all over to them. Good luck getting it back. And if you do, what do they do before they hand it back over to you? Right? And this business I'm in now, that on the radio, over the years I've always been, I don't have any contracts with anyone. People ask me about this sometimes. I am under no contract with anyone. I don't have a contract with the radio station. I don't have a contract with Steve Kane. And, we have gentlemen's agreements, but we don't have any written contracts. And that's on purpose. I don't want a contract with them. Now, Steve Kane and I have had many, 30-year relationships, so, and I've got a good relationship that's 7 years old with the radio station, so there's trust there. But when you're working for someone, your future's in their hands. And I started my podcast and my YouTube channel because I was tired of being under the control and whim of somebody else and their mood. And not that I had any problems with Steve Kane, but years ago we had a different arrangement with the radio station, Steve and I, and the person that we were beholden to, if they had a hemorrhoid or got their period, you're off the air. That's how it works. So years ago I said, enough of this. It's too stressful. I'm gonna start my own thing. And I knew a lot of people that were broadcasters that had good jobs and on top broadcasts, doing all kinds of things. And some of them are people you would know, some of them are people you may not know, but they're pretty well known. And they would they'd lose their job, like the Daily Wire's collapsing. A lot of people are going to lose their jobs, so they would be with a radio station or a media company, and they'd lose their job for whatever reason. And then they would try to start doing something online. They'd try to start a podcast, a YouTube channel or something. And rarely did it really ever work out. I know some people it has when they've gone that route, but most of the time it does. And I said to myself, this was like, I don't know, 12 or 15 years ago. I said to myself, I can't live like that anymore. I cannot live on how my future and my wife's future and my daughter's future is beholden to some guy who gets in a mood one day. So I started doing my own thing. And so that's why Brett Cooper went out on her own. That's why Candace Owens is out on her own. And it's just the way it is. So back to what's going on with the Daily Wire. Their biggest problems, I've gone through, but what'll probably happen with the Daily Wire is they'll be bought, and who buys them will, what the Daily Wire looks like after they're purchased will be decided based on who buys them. I mean, they may be bought by someone that is kind of wants to be a silent partner and try to keep it looking like it's the same thing while they're in the background. Or if someone like Patrick Bet-David bought it, he would become the face of it, right? So we shall see. But they're definitely on the verge of collapse. I've even heard in some of the reporting that's been going on online, they've already have names of companies that are looking to buy the Daily Wire. The thing with the subscription model that they have, I don't know. I'd ask you guys. I don't think the consumer of new media want to be behind a paywall. And that, it's different. Like, many of you are members here on my YouTube channel to help support me. I have a Patreon, that many of you are members of that support me. But it's not a paywall. All my content is free. There's not, okay, you got to pay me $15 a month to hear this segment of my show. I just don't think people want that. The newspapers have failed because they started requiring paid subscriptions online, and people wouldn't do it. Like right now, the Daily Mail, and I'm a big reader of the Daily Mail, but not so much. A couple weeks ago, they started putting a paywall up on the Daily Mail. Now, the Daily Mail is the most read English newspaper in the world, and they're left wing, but they cover everything. So it's a good news source. It's not my primary news source, but I do read it. But now, I don't know what percentage, but a lot of their stories, if you go to their website, the Daily Mail, if it says exclusive, you've got to be a paid subscriber to the Daily Mail now to read that. That's new the last couple of weeks. And that's a big mistake, because I'm finding myself going less and less to the Daily Mail. I used to go there several times a day, but because of the paywall, I find it annoying, and I'm not gonna do that. I don't think people want to have to subscribe. Plus, I mean, how many apps are you subscribed to, right? I mean, I've got Amazon Prime. I've got the Paramount app because I like some of their programming. And they've got Star Trek. I've got Hulu. I mean, how many apps do you have that you subscribe to now? I've got YouTube Premium. If you have YouTube Premium, you don't get ads on YouTube. So I've got, when you watch YouTube, so I have YouTube Premium, which is really cool. You guys should get it. So we already have, there were so many people that are into cord cutting with the cable. But if you have so many apps that you're paying for, are you really saving money cutting the cord on cable, right? Like, I remember when podcasts were new. I've always offered my podcast for free. always. Now, if you're a Patreon supporter of mine, you do get access to commercial-free editions of my podcast. So you get to listen to my podcast commercial-free if you're a Patreon supporter. But everyone still gets to listen to the whole podcast. So there's no paywall there. But with all the apps you're paying for just for your regular programming, are you going to pay the Daily Wire or the Blaze for a monthly subscription? I don't think so. Those monthly subscriptions add up, and how much value are you going to get? Like, I don't have Netflix, but from time to time there'll be something on Netflix I want to see, so I'll get the subscription for a month just to watch that. That's why a lot of the streaming services don't drop their whole seasons of episodes anymore. Like right now, there's a Paramount Plus. I have Paramount Plus because I like some of the programming. Landman was pretty good, but mainly because they have Star Trek, right? I like Star Trek. There's a new show with Dennis Quaid called Happy Face, where Dennis Quaid plays a serial killer. It's pretty good. And I started watching it the other day, and then I watched the second episode. I go to watch the third episode, and it's not going to be on until later this week. And if you remember, when the streaming services were new, they would drop the whole season. And the reason they don't do that is because, most of these shows are 10 episodes. You watch the 10 episodes, and then you cancel the app. So now they put them on once a week, like Severance. I'm a big fan of Severance, and if they put the whole season on at once, I'd watch it over the weekend. But they spread it out over 10 or 12 weeks, so I gotta, So that's what they do now. So the subscription model that the Daily Wire and the others are doing, I just don't think there's enough people that want to pay that. But when podcasting was new, I never did this, but I knew people who started setting up this paywall thing for their podcasts. Like the WTF podcast. I don't know if they still do this because I haven't listened to WTF in years. But he used to do a thing, Mark Maron, where you would get the recent episodes for free, but if you wanted to listen to the archives, you had to pay. I knew a few people. One of them was a pretty big name that I knew, wasn't really friends with, but knew, an acquaintance. And they put their entire podcast behind a paywall for like $1 an episode. This was something new that was going, this was maybe 10 or so years ago when podcasting was more new. And they would tell themselves, well, if I get 20,000 people tune this, and I've always offered my podcast for free. And, you can support me by supporting my sponsors that I endorse. You can, which is great, because I do have paid advertisement. You can support me by becoming a Patreon member to my podcast. You can support me by becoming a member on YouTube, but that's all voluntary. This idea that people want to charge you to listen to their podcast or their full podcast. If you want the complete episode, you've got to be. I think that's a failing business model, in my opinion. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. But the reason that I stay independent is I don't want to be beholden to any of these people and their moods. Like say, for example, I was doing my podcast with and YouTube channel through the Daily Wire. They're on the verge of collapse. What would happen to me if they owned my podcast and my YouTube channel and my socials? What would happen to me? I don't know. Maybe I'd get them back. Maybe I wouldn't. Maybe the new owners wouldn't give it back to me. Maybe they wouldn't. So you really, for people that want to get in this business, it's important to maintain ownership of your content and not give up ownership of your content. You've got to own your content. So, if something happened to, my father-in-law is very successful. And he gave me some advice. You hear me talk to Jupiter Joe Thomas about this a lot. My father-in-law gave me some very good advice. He said, you've always got to have a minimum of 3 businesses going on and 3 income streams, a minimum. Because if 1 or 2 of them are slow, the other one will be fine, right? So, and that's such great advice. That's when I talk about Joe Thomas, and we talk about annuities. We talk about that revenue stream, and I always tell him, successful people have multiple income streams. And he's like, that's right. But anyone who wants to become a podcaster or a YouTuber, or these things, you want to always keep ownership of your content. Because if you maintain the ownership of your content, you'll always be okay. In the old days when I just worked for a guy at a radio station, on an instant you're done. You're fired, or the radio station gets sold, or they change the format, and you're off the air. And what do? You got to scramble. And I just can't live like that. And I don't want my family to have to live like that. That's why I started everything I did. I don't know how long ago I started my podcast now and YouTube channel, but the first episode of my podcast, I can check the date. I don't remember the year. I remember the date. But I started my podcast, the Brian Craig Show podcast, which is on podcast platforms, the day after Benghazi. So that was like, what, September 12th? Was that 2012? I had dabbled around with podcasting before, but I started my current podcast then. You've always got to own your content. So when Steven Crowder, think about it. When Steven Crowder turned down the Daily Caller's offer, and he had taken a big financial hit because he had left the Blaze, they wanted ownership of his YouTube channel, of his podcast, and his socials, and all of his other endeavors. And he said no, he couldn't do that. That's a crazy offer. It's different if you don't have a presence. Like Brett Cooper's the opposite. She was not a known personality. She didn't have a podcast or a YouTube channel, and they gave her a name, so she was able to launch that. But if you're someone like me or Crowder, and you've spent years building up something, you just give it over to these people, and then it fails, where are you? Exactly. You're screwed. So I started talking earlier. Someone was talking to me the other day about getting picked up by one of these companies. I don't want to say which one. And I said, for me to do that, I would have to maintain complete ownership of my podcast and my other platforms, my socials and everything. I'm not going to give that over to someone, because who knows, what I've learned I learned this from Steve Kane early on in this business about contracts. Everybody wants a contract that makes them feel say, oh, I got a contract, I'm under contract. Contracts are always there to benefit the employer, not you. Always. Always, always, always. So if Crowder would have taken that contract and they took over ownership of his YouTube channel, his podcast, and his socials, that would have been all about them. And with this company, with that company collapsing or getting sold, do you think it would be easy for him to get all that back from new owners or a failing company that's desperate for money? I don't think so. I think he might have difficulty doing that, tell you the truth. So Steven Crowder made a smart decision. All right, I'm at the coffee shop, so I'll take a quick look at the chat before I sign off. September 10th, 2012. Yeah, but I wasn't streaming all the time then. I don't know when I started streaming every day on YouTube. And my podcast, that's on the Brian Craig Show podcast, my audio podcast, it's on all podcast platforms. I started that the day after Benghazi. Just coincidentally. It wasn't because of that. It was just coincidentally. But I was not streaming every day in 2012. I didn't stream on YouTube every day. I don't remember when. I was live streaming on Periscope, but not YouTube then. I'm all well. I'm all well. Well, listen, guys, I got to run. But if you're new, please subscribe. And if you're already subscribed, please like the video. And don't forget, guys, my podcast, if you do want to support me, you can become a member here on YouTube or become a Patreon supporter. There's a link in the description. But, it's all voluntary, okay? There's no paywall. Although Patreon supporters do have access to commercial-free editions of my podcast. But it does support me and help me quite a bit. All right, guys, I'll see you in about an hour on the air. Take care.